Coming soon.
Your thesis in genetic engineering was a work of genius. Literal genius.
You should tell her that joke you know.
So, what's in that room?
We'll have to go back later to that room.
We should only have another couple days before it hatches.
My college needs to know I'm being graded for my internship.
20 years from now, you'll see fairies taking your order at the local spaghetti saloon. They're not humans like you and me.
How familiar are you with mythology, Taylor?
How many species have you successfully spliced together? I'll work with you. I think I'm ready to see the rest of the experiments.
Hey!
Promise not to tell Dr. Elias that I was here. Dr. Elias. No.
Mercury Theater Podcast, March 29th.
The voice actors, they knew what they were doing. I did not, but they did, so that's cool. It was the second wave of podcasting that I got in. I think that Pluto should be called a planet. When I was 16, I shot a cop. We were trying to kill each other.
So we just got finished recording the episode, The Frozen Phoenix, and I am sitting here with, well, I guess we're a couple thousand miles apart or something, apart from Stargate Pioneer. And hey, Stargate.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going fantastic. So we just got finished with the recording for the episode, and I'm still fangirling over here. Like I see your face, and I'm like, oh, that's the guy that I'm accustomed to seeing, like on the podcast page and everything.
I get the feeling, because the very first podcast that I was involved in, I was just a fan of the podcast, and this is way back when podcasts were like really new. I'd become friends of the host of the show, and I thought that they were like radio personalities or, you know, like actors. Like I thought I was sitting in the room with George Clooney is basically it. And it turns out that they were just regular people, and they were just more experienced than me in running a podcast and how it goes. I actually have re-listened to that episode many times, and I was not dynamic whatsoever on the show, but it was really fun, and it was my first podcast recording. It's over 10 years ago now.
Yeah, you got in on the ground floor of podcasting.
Not quite. It was basically the second wave. It wasn't the first wave. It was the second wave of podcasting that I got in. And I don't even know what you call it these days. Podcasting has been around for just shy of 20 years, so it's been around the block a couple of times.
Yeah, I imagine that it's probably, you run into the same problem that I do when it comes to podcasting. Like, you're trying to explain to people not only that you're a podcaster, but what a podcast is. Because what difference does it make if you're a podcaster if you don't know what a podcast is?
Yeah, that's a little less of an issue these days. Matter of fact, we talk in the office regularly about podcasts, just not my podcast, but we talk about podcasts and different things about the industry that people like to listen to or for entertainment or something like that. So I think for the general public, telling them what a podcast is not as necessary as trying to just promote your podcast and get them to listen to your particular, find your podcast. Discovery is also a issue that is commonplace in podcasting. But aside from that, I remember having to tell my family what a podcast was, like my mom, my dad, and we just had a family Zoom call for the holidays. And instead of getting together, we got in our living rooms, whatever, and we had a little family Zoom call, and that was actually something that brought up. And it's like, hey, SP, you're still doing better podcasting, right? Yep. And a couple of them asked, well, what exactly is that? Well, since 2015, been helping people start their podcast or make their podcast better. And we've helped hundreds of people do it. So it's going pretty good. And they're like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty cool. Do you know so-and-so? No, I don't know Joe Rogan. Sorry. I'm not in the same league as Joe Rogan.
I think he has his own element by himself. There's a reason why you're saying Joe Rogan and not anybody else.
Well, I mean, you could say anybody in there, but I've met a lot of people which you would consider the old guard or at the top of podcasting. I've met them, but we don't talk on a continual basis. That's for sure. Matter of fact, if I tweet at them, they might not tweet back at me.
So going into the episode that we just recorded, so is this the first time that you've done an audio drama, or have you had experience with this?
I have not had any experience doing a live read-through of an audio drama or a live script recording or anything. I've just read lines off, one-off parts, one scene parts of a character and sent those in. So this was very interesting. It reminded me way back in grade school and high school when you put on those productions and having to go through all the rehearsals and everything. But it was really cool with the group that we had because it was pretty professional with the voice actors. They knew what they were doing. I did not, but they did. So that's cool.
Yeah, man, it was a really small room that we had. Actually, it's probably the smallest that I've had so far. And normally I have somewhere about 8 characters in the same room. It makes for post-production really difficult, but it also, it makes the room seem so much more diverse, not necessarily the word that I'm looking for, but it gives a lot more conversation, and it's a lot of fun to have everybody involved, and you have like that back and forth. I love the process of doing it. It is theater, but long distance theater.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than normal podcasting that I do. I tend to do talking head podcasts, and just the fact that you were there directing, and I was trying to put myself in the old theater mode from my grade school, high school days of just having somebody there that was controlling the room. And then when that person talked, everybody was listening and took the direction and everything. And I just took it for what it was, but it took me a second to reset into that mode versus just the talking head podcasting, which I usually do with 2 to 3 to 4 other people in the room, and we're all talking back and forth. And this one, it's whoever's talking on the script and then the director. And if we have a little break, which you put a few of those in, that was really good to reset everybody, especially after a particularly difficult scene where some of the voice actors' talent had a lot to say and they were trying to drudge through it. So from that perspective, it was pretty good. But otherwise, it's, you're in charge, and I'm good with that because how else is the production going to get done?
Yeah, it gives some consistency to it. But this, you and I talking right now, this is your domain, and that was my domain. This is where you're most comfortable.
I have actually, it's weird because I've interviewed professional actors, like the actors that are on films and TV and directors and producers, showrunners. I've interviewed them, but it's very difficult to get on the other side. Matter of fact, we tried to actually get on in a few of the podcasts. We tried to get on the sets as extras in a couple of the episodes, and it just wouldn't work out. The first show I did was Voices of Defiance, and that was filmed in Toronto, and they were all for us being up there, but they have an issue in Canada when you're filming to actually get a work permit. So getting a normal person like me on set is still difficult, or it was back then. So we never got that done. And then there was travel involved in schedules and whatever for the other shows that I podcasted on. So we never actually had the chance to do it, but I've talked to those people, but I've never been on the other side, and it's kind of fun. I've always wanted to be on the other side, and hopefully in the future, I'll be doing this a little bit more.
Yeah. So you just mentioned a podcast that you've been part of. But I know that you've done quite a few podcasts. What podcasts have you done so far? Should I say, have you hosted? Because I can imagine that you've done a lot more podcasts than hosted.
Yeah, hosted or produced. Hosted or produced, yeah.
So what podcasts have you done?
So the first one that I did from scratch was Voices of Defiance, and that was really fun. I'm a big science fiction guy. I like science fiction, and it was about a science fiction show on the channel Sci-Fi, or Skiffy, SYFY here. And it was really cool. I got to podcast with another one of the guys that I did my first podcast with. And what was really interesting in that is he got his wife to be on the podcast. And actually, that's not true. I got his wife to be on the podcast. So I was searching for another host. I knew that she was interested in it. So he said, go ahead and ask her. She's never going to do it because I've been asking her to do a podcast for years and she refuses to do it. So I asked her and she's like, I'm in. And he's like, okay, well, I'm doing this too. So it was the three of us to do that podcast. It was really fun. Like I said, we talked to a lot of the actors and we ended up talking to the showrunner at the end, which was really cool because the show got canceled and he had an idea for the next season of where the show was going to go. And to my knowledge, we are still the only place where you can go and find that information on where the showrunner wanted to go with the next season. I've also done a podcast on in the United States of America, we call it the CW Arrowverse. I'm not sure what other nations call it, but it's a DC Comics based universe. We call it the Arrowverse because Arrow was the first television show in all of that. And it was about the Green Arrow. It went 8 seasons and we did the podcast. And even though the universe expanded well beyond Arrow into 6, 7, 8 different shows, I believe, we decided to call it quits after 8 years. 8 years is a long time to do a single podcast. So we ended that. Also, Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. I've been doing since 2013, so 8 years now. And the good part about that is it was originally about the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. television show, which is a Marvel comic universe based show. But we got to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the MCU as it's known. So the Avengers, all those movies, the 20-some movies that are out for that. So we've been talking about that, and then all of the other television shows that have come out ever since. So that's been fun. So what's that, 3? And then I've been part of the Gonna Geek show for a while that I get to talk about my rocket science as a weekly basis. And then there's Better Podcasting, which I've been doing, like I said, since 2015. And that is literally to help other hobby podcasters. It was something that Steven and I, who's my co-host on Better Podcasting, we went into it and we thought, there's a lot of talk about how to make money with podcasts, about how to corporately podcast, but nobody was helping other podcasters that were doing it for a hobby or for fun. So we started Better Podcasting in 2015 specifically to help out that group of people. And we have helped out hundreds of people that have come and thanked us or come in into our live shows, our live chats, and thanked us or asked us questions. And it's been really fun doing that one because it's just other people like yourself, actually, that are interested in passion projects. And this has got a really low cost to enter, low barrier to enter in hobby podcasting or podcasting in general. So really glad that we were able to help a lot of people to do that. And yeah, that's what it was, 5 total shows. And of course I've guested or been part of numerous other shows as well, but yeah, five shows.
Quite the extensive list.
Yeah, I actually forgot another show that's pod faded, but it was actually a spinoff of Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was called Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. Longbox Edition. I still own it. I could still start it right back up at any point in time, but it was just talking about the weekly comic books that were dropped for Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. And let me tell you, being AARP age and still being interested in comic books, it's a select few of us that are in that realm that are not total living in your mom basement geeks, that sort of thing.
So what introduced you to podcasting to start off with?
That is a long story. It takes me back to my childhood, believe it or not. And I was listening to Minnesota North Star hockey games on the radio. And then after the game would be over and I'd be in bed because my parents wouldn't let me out of bed, but they'd let me listen to the radio. I would listen to radio dramas that came on there. So I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. So I kind of like the sportscaster realm. I like the newscaster realm. I liked the radio dramas at the time. And I thought that would be neat to do someday.
Do you have a radio drama that you liked in particular that really stands out?
I've tried to look and search back to those days. Because I think it was just local people like on WCCO radio, that's in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and wherever the North Stars were streaming. I don't know if I think it would be like podcasts are today, where I don't even know if they exist anymore. But yeah, I liked listening to them. Some were Victorian era, some were science fiction, some were whatever, but I don't remember what they were called. This is back in the 70s.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to get you off the path.
No problem. So if you fast forward, decades, and I was doing a lot of driving around for my kids' sports, and we had a minivan with satellite radio on board. So XM radio or Sirius radio here in the United States. And I started listening to it because the car came with the obligatory 6-month subscription. So I was listening to it, and I was going through the stations, and it didn't really have everything that I wanted on there. It had comedy, it had sports talk, it had news talk, but I'm like, it would be really cool if there would be a station here that would be talking about like TV, and not just like the big TV shows like ER or Cheers or Friends, but like sci-fi. That would be great to have something that was out there to talk about sci-fi. Well, I couldn't find anything. And then I remember when the iPods came out, I'm like, you know what? I want to try an iPod because I've heard of this thing called podcast. And I don't know what that is, but it sounds like it could be neat. And I've heard it can be something like a satellite radio show. So I'm like, maybe there'd be a chance that there'd be something that was science fiction in there. So I got myself an iPod back in 2007. And I started listening to podcasts, and it was mainstream shows at the time. It was like Mike and Mike in the Morning on ESPN radio. I was into sports back then, a lot more than I am now. And so I was listening to them because I had to go to work. I couldn't listen to the whole show. And it was really an entertaining show, in my opinion, at the time. And I wanted to learn all about the sports and everything and what was going on. And I wanted to win my fantasy football league, which I did. And I wanted to do that sort of stuff. But along the way, I started searching for what else I could listen to, some science podcasts and whatever. And then I ran into this podcast about the television show Battlestar Galactica. I was like, ooh, this would be cool. And then there was like 2 of them. I was like, whoa, these are my peeps. So I started listening to those. And I was like, I could never do that. That's wow. These people, they must be trained communications personnel. They must have a ton of technical gear in order to do this, which is true, by the way. You did back then need a significant amount of technology to be able to podcast, a lot more so than you need today. And I became a fervent fan of one of the shows. It was called Galactic Water Cooler. It actually, when it first came out, it was called Galactica Water Cooler, and then it became Galactic Water Cooler, or GWC. And they were kind enough to invite me in, and they had a meetup of all their fans. They had like 5 meetups throughout the years, and this was one of them. And I just wanted to see the people that they were talking about all the time and meet these other people that were interested in Battlestar Galactica, because believe it or not, there were not a lot of people that wanted to admit, that lived by me at the time anyway, that they liked Battlestar Galactica. So I was like, I wanted to talk about Battlestar Galactica. So I met them, and they actually allowed me to be in one of their podcast recordings. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Again, they did have a lot of gear. He was the guy that ran it, Chuck was a musician. So he had a lot of the musician bass, a huge mixer that had a FireWire connection so that he could record multi-track, which for those that don't know about podcasting, multi-track means you can record each individual microphone on its own track and it's not combined into one track, so you can separate them out later. For those of us that podcast remotely, like we did for this read through, it's inherent. Everybody records locally and then they send the files to you, and then you have to deal with the multi-track editing afterwards. But I was just having a blast doing it. And they as far as performers, they just amazed me, because we would be just sitting talking about just regular stuff like, what are we going to have for breakfast? And, the sort of dull stuff, and the sort of talking like, well, yeah, mm-hmm. yeah, maybe we should get some chairs in here. Yeah. And then he would hit record and he would point at everybody like we're on. And he had the ability to actually play the intro, which he did. And then right when the spot in the intro was that he would start talking in the actual podcast, he came and he was so animated. He said, and we're here for another week of Galactic Water Cooler. I'm Chuck, and I'm here with Audra and Sean, and here with us is SP. And it just was shocked to me that they went from 0 to full energy in just the time that the intro took. And I was floored, but I had the bug that bit me then. That was New Year's Eve, 2009. So 2010. That was New Year's Eve, 2010. So New Year's Eve, 2020 was my 10th year of podcast anniversary. So I've been podcasting for 10 years. After that recording, I went home and I got interested enough in podcasting that eventually started podcasting with other people, guesting, and that led to starting Voices of Defiance. And it's been a fun ride. I really enjoy it. And I really enjoy storytelling, and I really enjoy listening to audio dramas amongst science podcasts and my own podcasts on geeky stuff. So yeah, that's kind of my journey right there.
You talk about all these geeky shows like Battlestar Galactica and everything, but knowing that you have a history in rocket science, how does it hold up?
Oh, Battlestar Galactica. Well, first of all, it never held up. The science behind Battlestar Galactica never held up. Faster than light drives, maybe, but it just depends on who you talk to on how they should work. Star Trek is actually the closest of actual science with everything that's involved because Gene Roddenberry wanted it to be based on actual science. So it's not like The Expanse real, but it is futuristic real of what's possible with warp drives and phasers and stuff like that. But yeah, Battlestar Galactica, no, that's just for fun. Yeah, I like for fun sci-fi too. I don't have to have, I'm not Neil deGrasse Tyson, which nitpicks everything.
He does. I like hearing some of his, what he has to say about some of the shows that I've, or movies that I've seen. So, I think that you've told me something about your history with the police. What?
Oh, yeah. I don't think I've ever talked about this on a podcast before. This is pretty cool. So for those that don't know, yeah, I did indeed. When I was 16, I shot a cop.
How did that happen? What? It's just like I shot a cop. The end of story, or is there more to that?
Oh yeah, there's definitely more to that. So. It was the night before Thanksgiving when I was 16, so way back when. I won't give away the year, but let's just say it was a long time ago. And I was 16, so my buddies and I were like, "Hey, let's go out and let's do the thing." So I'm like, "Okay, well, I guess I'm doing the thing." I asked my parents for the car. They're like, "Sure." I didn't have my own car back then. And so I borrowed the car, picked everybody up, and we went to the local park, and we got out, and we started running around the park, and we were trying to kill each other. And the neighbors to the park got really, really worried about all these muzzle flashes in the park. So they called the cops, and because they thought we had silencers on our guns because there was no weapons noise, they sent the SWAT team after us. We didn't know any of this at the time. And by the way, the park was right next to the police station, so they didn't have to go far. So they were there, and this is night before Thanksgiving. I want to say it's like, I don't know, 7 o'clock, but it was in Minnesota, 6, 7 o'clock. It's Minnesota. It's dark then. And so we were having fun with our little effort there, and then all of a sudden I had a guy pop up in front of me, and I thought he was on the other side, so I just was kamikaze. I stood up and I started running towards him with my gun firing and shooting him, and it took me a few seconds to realize he wasn't in laser tag gear, and he was in SWAT gear, and he had a weapon with a laser sight pointed at me. Oh! Yeah, I shot him with a laser tag gun. That's the thing. Yeah.
You buried the lead there.
I did so intentionally. See, that's a good. I'm learning on the storytelling thing. So,
Yeah.
He laughed. They figured out what we were doing. They figured out that we were just a bunch of laser taggers. And the woman that called us, he couldn't tell us who it was, but she was 80 and she couldn't hear a gun go off if a gun was going off, but she was watching TV and all of a sudden she saw all these lights, because laser tag guns back then, they flashed red lights out of the muzzle, and they were black back then. So they weren't, color coded to prevent incidents happening
Confusion,
or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, she called the police, and the police saw it out of their windows of the police station, and they used it as a training opportunity. So they knew going in that they were not going to shoot anybody or anything. But they rounded us up and got us into the cruiser and got our IDs and all that, and kind of fake arrested us. I assume it was fake because there's no record of me being actually arrested. We had to call they called the parents just to tell them that everything was fine, really. And then they just told us, look, if you're going to be doing this, it was a public park at the time. There was no laws against it. They said, look, if you're going to be doing this, just give us a call. We're like, just give you a call? Yeah, just give us a call. Tell us you're doing this. And we're like, okay. So then we were able to go back several times throughout that winter to use the park for laser tag. And then the next year, we were told not to use that park anymore. So we didn't use that park anymore, but we still called the cops wherever we were going because we didn't want any incidents. So we called the non-emergency number and just said, hey, we're going to be at such and such a park at such a time. Are there any issues? And they would say no. Occasionally we would add a cop that came by and they didn't know. Laser tag was so new back then. They were like, oh, cool. I haven't seen one of these. These are great. So we had a good relationship with the cops, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It kind of puts me at a little bit more ease on having somebody who shot a cop on my podcast.
Yeah, especially given current climate, I wouldn't want anybody that shot a cop on my podcast either.
Yeah, so the header for this episode is going to be "I shot a cop," and then I'll completely take everything else out, and it's like, oh, well, nobody's going to explain that. Okay.
See, that's clickbait, right?
And genius. It's genius. Yeah, it's extra. Stargate Pioneer killed a cop. Yeah. So this being your first live recording in it, do you think that this is something that you're thinking that it might be something that you want to do again, or is it just like, okay, I just had to do it?
No, this is definitely something that I want to do. I want to do more of. I've actually auditioned to quite a few parts, and I'm not dismayed that I didn't get them because the level of talent is just so amazing out there that I don't have as much experience with acting or voice acting. I mean, the best voice actors are actual actors that have been trained in acting. So maybe I need to take some classes in acting, and even if they're online classes and do that. But yeah, this is something that I definitely would like to do more of in the future. I would like to perfect my craft. I would like to just, enjoy the experience, because being a part of creating a story like we did tonight, that was fine. You did all the script writing, you were the director, but just being part of the story as it's going through. I can't tell you how many times I've watched a good television show. Ask me later about a good television show, but I've watched a good television show. I'm like, yeah, I would really like to be a part of it, even as an extra, just to be on set and just to be a part of it. And in Star Trek terms, be a red shirt. I'd like to be a red shirt and get killed off, whatever. I'd still be in the episode, or a really good movie that tells a really good story that wins an award. That would be great, just to be an extra off in the distance. And there are people that do that. There are people that live around production hubs that look out for being an extra, and they go be an extra. You have to devote X amount of time to it, days, weeks sometimes, but yeah, I'd like to do it.
Still fangirling over here. So you said something about a good TV show. What's a good TV show?
Ooh, well, nothing on sci-fi anymore, unfortunately. I've adapted a new rule, and that is I won't watch a show until it's had a successful 3 seasons that is aired over the air. And the reason is a lot of the shows that I've wanted to watch, genre type shows, they end up getting canceled. They get canceled early, or they have a good one season and they just get bad after that. And like I mentioned, I'm ARP age.
How do you feel about the Orville?
I have not watched that show, and we've talked about it on the Gonna Geek show yet. I have not watched it because it had not had a successful 3 seasons yet. And they have changed to a Hulu model, and apparently Seth MacFarlane, who runs the show, has run into a lot of issues because of that, and he wants out of the show. So I fear that the show won't end very well if it ends at all. It might just be a cliffhanger. And that was another thing. I've watched some genre shows with cliffhangers and they just end it. And it's like, what the?
Yeah.
So I think a good TV show would be one that is successful for 3 seasons that's over the air. Now, for streaming shows, I bend the rules on streaming shows, because streaming shows, there's so much competition out there, but it's like the BBC model where you have a pool of money from the streaming service, Netflix, Prime, whatever it is, and they create really good shows and they put them out sporadically. It's like a 6-episode season or a 10-episode season or maybe a 13-episode season max. There's not a lot of filler episodes. They know where they're going with the story. They know if they're going to be picked up for a second season or something like that. Now, I know that's getting a little bit more convoluted these days, where shows are being canceled on streaming service a lot more than they used to. But on the whole part, for now, the shows on the streaming service has been great. I mentioned The Expanse before. I realized that it's not The Expanse of season 1, season 2, but it's still good. Game of Thrones, HBO, was a great show until I just noticed that the background of the show was just to kill off everybody. That was what was happening. And I have a problem watching something like that because there's nobody for me to root for, because I want a hero or an anti-hero or whatever to root for, and I wasn't getting that from that. So the last episode I watched of Game of Thrones was the Battle of the Bastards. It was a great episode, and I was like, you know what? It's just not going to get any better than this. I'm done right here. I know there's more to watch, but I know I'm going to get more and more pissed off if I watch further. So this is going to be the last one. This is going to be it for me. The Battle of the Bastards is my headcanon ending for Game of Thrones.
Yeah. No, that's probably the best way. I mean, especially since you've heard about all of the reviews on the last season, I'm sure. And it's like,
yes.
Yeah, good. I stopped where it was like at the peak. Yeah.
Yep. Get out while the getting's good and move on with life. Like I was saying before, I'm ARP age, so I don't have a lot of time left in life. So I don't want to spend it consuming bad things. And we live in an age where you don't have to sit in front of the TV at the time something is airing. You don't even have to catch it in reruns. You can catch it streaming on whatever service it is or whatever later. You can buy the episodes a lot of times on different services like Prime or iTunes or whatever Apple's calling their video thing now. So yeah, there's no need to spend time, to waste time on bad TV.
Well, speaking of running out of time, tell us, SP, how would followers be able to follow you?
I'm on Twitter at Stargate Pioneer. I'm also on Instagram at Stargate Pioneer. I don't post as much as I used to on those 2 platforms, but you can find me there. You can also find me on the Gonna Geek Network, which you can find at gonnageek.com. I can start listing off different podcasts like betterpodcasting.com, but I'm not going to bore everyone to that. The best places to get a hold of me are probably there. I'm also on Discord, by the way. So if you go to gonnageek.com/Discord, that'll get you into our network Discord server, but I'm in a variety of different places.
There's so many different avenues with what we've talked about that we could take. Like, we could have made this into a 3-hour conversation just to start off with, just from what content we have already. But, you know, I definitely have to have more conversations with you in the future. But
sure. Just cast me again in one of your episodes, and I'll be glad to do an after show with you.
Yes. Okay, so tit for tat. I like it. Stargate Pioneer, it was an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. And see, this is where I fail. I keep on doing this, like, if there's anything I can do for you, like, this is who I am. I won't take anything from anybody without offering my services too. But I mean, what do I have to offer?
You have a lot, if you, obviously, SP, you need an acting coach. So we'll give you a couple free lessons. So I'm like, it's just great. This was a great opportunity for me to be part of this episode and be part of this audio drama. I really appreciate it. You did a lot of great writing for it, and I just look forward to hearing it when it comes out.
Yeah, honestly, I was so afraid that you were going to read this and read all of the pseudoscience that I have incorporated in here, and then just, like, kind of go into that nitpicking, like, oh, that wouldn't work because the chromosomes and the DNA, like, that's, like, talking about the tree as opposed to the nut, like there's so much that's there.
We talk about CRISPR all the time at work. My son's into the business, and I have a coworker who has a son that has SMA. So she is delved hard into genetics. And so we've had a couple in-depth conversations about genetics and stuff like this. And I've read a lot of professional papers. I like the infotainment science shows like Nova, and just other shows that you can get on this sort of stuff. I love Cosmos. Cosmos is like my favorite pop science show that I can watch. Even though Neil deGrasse Tyson and me, we've had a couple of words over the years, right? But he is a showman. Yeah, I've been involved in some DC science panels with him before, and he wouldn't remember me, but I've met him, and I've raised some decent points to him, and he's raised decent points back to me. So, for example, the Pluto planet thing. So this is where Neil deGrasse Tyson and I are at diopposed ends.
So I think that Pluto's a planet?
I think that Pluto should be called a planet. Now, I get scientifically that it is a dwarf planet or a protoplanet or whatever you want to call it, whatever the classification is these days. But if we ever want to actually get money to resource a mission to do more science at Pluto in this particular age, we have to call it an actual planet, because nobody wants to go out and see an asteroid. I mean, there's more and more interest in that, but people, they really want to get out into outer space. And Pluto, what is up with that? It's an actual planet at the far reaches of the solar system. How is it out there? How was it made? Does it have an atmosphere? That sort of thing. And if it's just basically an asteroid, who cares? There are asteroids closer. Circe's, a bunch of different moons closer than that. Why do that? So that's why I'm diametrically opposed to Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he wasn't even the guy that came up with it, but he's been the face of calling Pluto not a planet anymore. So I tried to get him to understand the funding source of it, and he didn't really. He thought it was an interesting point, but in the end, he didn't care because he hasn't brought it up since, other than our conversation. So yeah.
I guess out of anybody who I certainly know, you would be the person who would know about funding a planet versus an asteroid.
There are economic reasons to do asteroid research. It gets into the formation of the solar system, the fact that we are actually in the solar system Mark II, and there was a sun before our sun, and it created all these heavy metal elements and precious metals and stuff like that. So some of that has coalesced all over the solar system. Some of it is more accessible in asteroids. There are probably some asteroids out there that are entirely made of diamonds or some other sort of precious metal that we don't have a lot of, nickel, whatever. And it'd be great to be able to use that as a resource, because we're running out of precious metals here on Earth. But again, that's getting space mining is not something that's right in front of our face. We got a few more years for that to happen.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of research in regards to that, and it seems like you have to spend a whole lot of money, but once you've spent a whole lot of money, then it becomes cheaper and cheaper every time you do something. So if you were to do mining, it's going to cost way more than you're going to get out of it until after a certain point, and then it starts like paying dividends. You have a couple podcasts out there, so go ahead and feel free to shamelessly plug yours.
Shamelessly. Well, you can find all my podcasts, ironically, all in one locations at gonnageek.com, but I have 3 active ones at the moment. I have the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast, which you can also find at legendsofshield.com, which talks all about the Marvel grand universes, comic book, cinematic, that sort of thing. And that's very important right now as we're talking, because WandaVision is out now, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier is going to be out soon. I also have a podcast about podcasting called Better Podcasting. And there is the Gonna Geek show, which I talk all about rocket science stuff. So those are the 3 main podcasts that I'm on these days.
That is a long list. I actually just started watching WandaVision as of yesterday. So I've gotten 3 episodes in.
As an audio drama guy, I'm wondering how you would take that because of the sitcom-esqueness of it. It's based on sitcoms all the way from I Love Lucy and the Dick Van Dyke Show all the way up to modern sitcoms. So I'm wondering how your take is going to be on that. So you could send in some feedback to the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. show and let us know.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Yeah, I'll watch it as homework.
See? You ask me to come on your show and I give you homework. That's how it goes.
Oh, yes. Thank you, SP. I really appreciate having you, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming episode.
I am too. It's been an absolute blast. Thank you again very much for having me on. This was a dream come true, and thanks for putting up with me and my lack of acting skills, apparently, but I'm looking forward to seeing the magic of post here.
Mercury Theater Podcast is 100% listener supported. If you like this podcast and want bonus content, support us on Patreon for as little as $2 a month. Speaking of, we'd like to give a special shout out to our very first honorary Mercurian, Clay Corbin. Because of his support, he will also get a character named in his honor in an upcoming episode. Find us on all the socials at Mercury Theater Podcast and on our website, mercurytheaterpodcast.com. The winner for the stainless steel Mercury Theater Podcast water bottle is being announced on our episode at the end of the month, March 29th. If you haven't already, send your name via email to me at john@mercurytheaterpodcast.com. The R before the E. Until then, I'm John Badger.
Now what?